What is up, guys? I'm back here for another preseason ranking, and this time we're doing the ACC. Obviously, you can tell that I'm not where I normally am, but this is very, very temporary, just a one or two video thing. I will say, though, that the seating that I am sitting on now, this couch, is so much more comfortable than what I have back at home, so I will appreciate that while I can. Anyways, getting into our rankings, number 17, I have the Stanford Cardinal. And it wasn't too long ago that Stanford was a smash mouth powerhouse, turning out NFL linemen and winning double digit games. But now they're still looking for a permanent head coach, and last season was just so forgettable that most fans didn't even really watch. Turnovers, failed third downs, and one of the worst O lines in the conference turned them from bad to basically invisible. This year, I do think we should see some improvement, but not enough to climb too far. Offense will be better than last year, but again, that's a low bar. Offensive line adds some transfer help, so it should be a little bit less of a disaster, but depth is still thin, and nobody looks like an obvious anchor here. At quarterback, there is a glimmer of hope in Elijah Brown. He's talented, and if the line holds, he might keep Stanford respectable. As for the running back room, they are fine, but not really spectacular, and they're going to struggle if blocking doesn't improve. Their weapons are really uninspiring. Receivers were an issue last year, and while some transfers came in, there's not really a proven playmaker in this year. For Brown to shine, they're going to need someone to emerge as a reliable target, which is still a really big unknown. On defense, they're thin and vulnerable. Last year's defense was among the worst in the conference, especially against the pass. But this year, the back end is still alarmingly thin. Colin Wright should be a solid piece at corner, and there's some returning experience on the D-line and at linebacker, but overall, there's just not enough talent or depth to scare ACC offenses. Overall, there's just not any clear identity to this team or the head coach stability. Offense has holes everywhere, and defense remains porous, especially in the secondary. At number 16, I have the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. And after last season's struggles, Wake Forest decided to clean house. New head coach, new OC, new DC, and goodbye to the trademark slow mesh offense. In its place is a faster system with more outside runs and hopefully the spark that the Demon Deacons need to succeed. But turnover isn't just on the sideline, it's everywhere on the field as well. On offense, they're almost entirely new, for better or for worse. The offensive line was brutal last year, so the new staff went heavy in the portal. And they're replacing almost every starter, including adding a star tackle from Washington State, whose name is a little too hard to pronounce here, so I'm not going to do it, but his talent is undeniable. Even if the line doesn't become a strength overnight, it should be better simply because it really can't get much worse. At running back, they have a solid returner who should benefit if the O-line stabilizes. And he's going to need to do good because a lot's going to ride on the ground game while the passing attack takes that time to gel and get sorted out. At quarterback, it's an open battle. On one end, you have Robbie Ashford, who is a mobile guy, dual threat guy, and on the other side is Deshaun Purdue, who's more of a traditional arm type of guy. I expect Ashford to win out because of his ability to make big plays on the ground, which might be needed, again, if the receivers take that time to gel. Speaking of receivers, it's a brand new group except for one returning starter who played significant snaps. There's no proven stars here, so someone is going to have to step up and step up fast. On defense, they're also in transition. New DC, new philosophy, and several new faces via the portal, many following their head coach from Washington State. It's not going to be elite overnight, but there's hopes that they'll be more aggressive and fundamentally sound than they were last season. But here's why I think they might struggle. When you are adding a new scheme, a new players, and new staff all at once, it can be a lot. It usually takes a season to figure out the right combinations and the right chemistry. So to me, this feels like a bridge season, more about finding out what Wake Forest's next identity is than chasing immediate success. At number 15, I have the Virginia Cavaliers. And last season was pretty rough for Virginia, especially on offense where they finished second to last in scoring, and on defense where they couldn't even buy a sack. So they did what most struggling programs do and hit the portal hard, bringing in over 30 new faces that try to flip that script. But how did they do? Well, they brought in a transfer quarterback in Chandler Morris, and at the G5 level, he showed flashes. Mobile, competitive, and better than what the Cavs trotted out last season. But playing against ACC defenses is a different challenge, and he's unlikely to be a true game changer in my opinion. At the skill positions, the Cavs did lose last year's best producers, but to be fair, those guys weren't really lighting up scoreboards anyways. They also added in some transfer wide receivers and running backs, but nothing there really screams star to me. The one bright spot, though, is Trell Harris, who should return from injury and give Morris at least one reliable target. The real question here is the offensive line. Can they stop the bleeding? Last year's O-line was bad, the biggest single weakness on the team, so they added some bodies via the portal, and they also lost some key pieces. Net improvement? Probably. It almost has to be, but it's unclear how big of a jump that will be. If the line gels quickly, then Morris could look like a solid ACC quarterback. If not, I'm afraid it might be another long season. On defense, it's a bit of patchwork, but with an upside. The secondary lost major contributors, but they replaced them with experienced transfer safeties, a smart move that should help stabilize them on the back end. At cornerback, though, that remains a glaring question mark. Up front, the Cavs have been allergic to sacks the past few years, and they did bring in some new faces to help, and they also returned some linebackers who at least add some leadership and continuity. Overall, the defense feels slightly better, deeper, older, and hopefully a bit meaner as well. And here's why I think they might surprise some people. The huge transfer class means new energy. There's a better quarterback and at least some upgrades to the O-line and in the secondary. So in theory, the offense should climb out of the basement. However, so many new players means major chemistry risk. Morris is an upgrade, but not a star. Skill talent is thin, and the O-line could still be a problem. On defense, corners could be picked apart all season long. So in summary, Virginia got more experienced, more athletic, and more interesting, but it's still a patchwork team, and big improvement is not guaranteed, just possible. At number 14, I have the Cal Golden Bears, and it still baffles me that this team plays in the Atlantic Coastal Conference when they can basically see the Pacific Ocean from campus, but conference map aside, the real problem here is not geography, it's the offense, and they look to take a real step back this season. On offense, they lost last year's quarterback in Fernando Mendoza and star running back Jay Knott, as well as Javian Thomas and most of the depth behind him. They tried to patch the running back room via the portal, but it still feels thin and underwhelming. Unless someone really breaks out unexpectedly, the run game could be a real liability for this team. At quarterback, they have Devin Brown transferring in, and he has a solid pedigree, but he's unproven at this level. There's also some buzz around a promising young freshman who could challenge for the job, but either way, I think this position is shaky. The wide receiver group was nothing special to begin with, and there's really not too much to get excited about now. The offensive line was outright bad last year, and yes, it's a bit deeper now thanks to some transfers, but depth does not always mean quality. At best, I think it improves from reliability to below average. Overall, on paper, this offense just does not scare anyone. On defense, the good news is the line and linebacker group is actually pretty respectable. They have a returning talent group that should hold up against the run, but the bad news is the secondary lost some key starters and the replacements are largely transfers. They might gel, but it's a question mark that could be exposed by pass-heavy ACC teams. But here's why I think they could overachieve. If Devin Brown adapts quickly, the freshman quarterback can add real competition, and the offense might find that spark that they need. And if the front seven can turn pressure into actual sacks, that would help protect a vulnerable secondary. However, the offense lost its engine in Jay Knott and his quarterback, and the replacements don't look ready to carry the load. The O-line still looks like a bottom-tier ACC unit, and there isn't enough elite talent at receiver to keep defenses honest. And at number 13, I have Boston College. And it's no secret that I am not a believer in Bill O'Brien as a head coach. And heading into year 2, there's very little to suggest that Boston College is ready to make a real jump. There's just too many holes, too many question marks, and not enough proof that this staff can elevate the roster. On offense, they're unsettled at quarterback and thin up front. Castellanos is gone, and let's be real, even he only provided occasional sparks before he got benched. So now it's a battle between the guy who replaced him and Alabama transfer Dylan Lonergan, neither of whom scream game changer to me. So quarterback is likely a liability, not a strength. There are pieces as far as weapons go. Explosive running back Jordan McDonald could be the lone star on offense, and veteran wide receiver Lewis Bond and Reed Harris add size and experience. But the offensive line is replacing 3 starters, and that was a unit that already struggled in the red zone last year. Hard to see how this offense suddenly clicks under Bill O'Brien, who frankly hasn't shown he can scheme around these issues. On defense, they are missing the difference makers. The departure of Donovan Ezraku, an All-American pass rusher, is absolutely brutal. They have some experienced players up front, but nobody who can replace that level of production. They do have a solid veteran secondary, likely to be the best unit on the team, but with a pass rush that figures to be worse, even that group may end up being exposed. Here's what little hope I think that there is for this team. Jordan McDonald could carry that offense. He's a veteran receiver who can bail out shaky quarterback play. And the secondary might keep them in games if the front holds up. But here's why I'm not buying the Boston College stock. Again, Bill O'Brien has not proved he can elevate an average roster. Major O-line questions after losing 3 starters, no proven quarterback, red zone inefficiency from last year likely sticks around, and the pass rush takes a clear step back. Overall, I'm just not convinced Bill O'Brien has the answers, and this roster is not built to cover those coaching gaps. Expect another grinded-out season in Chestnut Hill with the same old red zone struggles, leaky pass protection, and an offense that never really gets rolling. At number 12, I have the North Carolina Tar Heels, and there is a lot of excitement around Bill Belichick's first season in Chapel Hill, and there's good reason to be. He is an NFL legend. But this is college football. It's not the NFL. And in year one, with so much roster turnover, it's hard to see a team like this make serious noise right away. On offense, they bring in a new quarterback in Gio Lopez from South Alabama. And honestly, I do like the fit. He's accurate, he protects the football, and he has enough mobility to make plays. Exactly the kind of quarterback that Belichick usually leans on. But the big question here is, can this new look offense gel quickly? Skill positions, they have talent, but no proven stars. Losing Omarion Hampton is brutal, and the 2 solid backs that return are solid, but it's impossible to replicate Hampton's production. Depth is fine, but the running back room likely takes a step back. At wide receiver, there is raw talent, but almost nobody is proven. Lots of portal additions, but it's hard to trust chemistry this early. If everything clicks, it could be a really dynamic unit. But if not, expect highlight plays mixed with long droughts. The tight end group is also largely new, adding to that uncertainty, but the offensive line is more experienced on paper. But much of that experience does come from outside of the program. They might avoid being a liability, but it's unclear if they'll actually be a strength for this team. On defense, there's a new scheme, new faces everywhere, especially up front. The entire defensive line is made up of new starters, and the linebacker unit only has a couple of returners, meaning there's almost no continuity. They needed to fix the run defense, which was awful last year, but it's unclear if talent alone can do that. The bright spot, though, the secondary has most returning experience and should be solid. But coverage does not matter if opponents can run all over you again. In summary, there is some intrigue here. Belichick makes this team the most unpredictable one in the ACC, but between the roster churn and the new scheme, growing pains feel inevitable. Expect moments of promise, but it's probably a rebuilding year more than a breakout. At number 11, I have the NC State Wolfpack, and it's a new era in Raleigh with 2 new coordinators, a faster-paced offense, and a defense built around pressure. Even so, NC State is not starting from scratch. They actually have a solid core returning, which keeps them interesting in 2025. On offense, CJ Bailey is back at quarterback, and he quietly impressed last year, showing poise and flashes of real playmaking. If he can cut down on the turnovers, which was his biggest issue last year, he could take a real step forward. The new OC should mean a quicker tempo and more spread concepts, which will fit Bailey's skill set pretty well, I think. In the backfield, they are thin but explosive. They lost some running backs, but honestly, those backs weren't really productive anyways. So enter Hollywood Smothers, who is small, quick, and effective. But the main problem here is going to be depth. If Smothers goes down, they're in trouble because that means they'll be a one-dimensional team. At receiver, yes, they are losing Concepcion, who's one of their best weapons, but they did keep a decent group of receivers who should thrive in this faster system. Also, the tight end room looks solid and could become a real safety valve for this team. The offensive line did lose some starters on the right side, but the left side should be solid and could anchor this unit. They also have some depth, which helps overall. The O-line could actually be a strength, though watch that right side against better pass rushes because I think that might be a big weakness. On defense, up front, they lost a bit of production, but they still have a deep, experienced line. At linebacker, veterans return, and Temple transfer Charles Thomas should add real quarterback pressure, matching with the DC's aggressive philosophy. Secondary is the big unknown. Mostly new starters, a mix of transfers and very young players. They could get burned early and against good passing teams, but there's a lot of raw talent here, and if the freshmen can adjust quickly, it might not be a disaster. In summary, new coordinators promise fresh energy, and there's enough experience here to think that the Wolfpack could actually be better than they were last season. But thin depth, a brand new secondary, and a quarterback who has to clean up some of those mistakes can keep them from feeling like true contenders. Still, definitely a team I think you should watch. At number 10, I have Syracuse. And Fran Brown made people believe in orange football again last season, but this year looks tougher. They lost almost all their top offensive producers, and while there is homegrown depth and some promising young talent, the question is, can that translate into real production on the field? On offense, they're starting from scratch. They lost everything. Nation's passing leader in Kyle McCord, star running back LaQuint Allen, and their top 3 receivers, including Pena. So only one skill player who contributed meaningfully last season returns. So there is a lot to replace. And at quarterback, it's a true battle between LSU transfer Ricky Collins, who saw very limited snaps last season, and Notre Dame transfer Steve Angeli. Neither has proven much at this level, so odds are quarterback play is not going to be their strength. As for the receivers, it's a homegrown gamble. Instead of dipping into the portal, Syracuse is promoting mostly in-house receivers, which on the plus side means there's not really chemistry concerns because they know the system. On the downside, they aren't proven producers, so expecting them to replace Pena and company is probably unrealistic. At running back, they're also relying on some homegrown talent who hasn't shown big production yet. The O-line is where the portal help comes in. They brought in some transfers who specifically are there for pass protection, which matters in Fran Brown's offensive scheme. The line should be better, but there are still question marks, especially when it comes to run blocking. At defense, Syracuse is quietly putting together a unit that could keep them competitive. At defensive end, losing Fidel Diggs does hurt, but David Reese should step in nicely, and David Omapariola's development could give them real pass rush presence. Other portal additions help fill out the line, and depth looks okay. At linebacker, they did lose their leading tackler in Justin Barron, but there's enough talent here that they should be at least solid, if not spectacular. The secondary is deeper. You got Deuce Chestnut, who is legit. Devin Grant, who's another strong piece. They have a safety room that looks stacked. And a cornerback room, that's where the real question mark is. That position could get picked on by good passing teams. In summary, it's hard to lose that much production and not feel it. Syracuse is betting on development and continuity from within, plus a few strategic transfers. And the defense might quietly carry them farther than people might think. But matching last year's magic is going to be tough. However, the foundation being built could pay off in the long run. At number 9, I have Virginia Tech. And the Hokies had the pieces last year to make some real noise, but ultimately, they fell short. This year, the roster isn't quite that talented, but some intriguing transfers and staff changes are cause for some real upside, if everything clicks. On offense, they bring in OC Philip Montgomery, who's known for developing quarterbacks, which is huge because Kyron Drones might be the most talented quarterback in the ACC. He's got a big arm and he's dangerous on the move, but he does also have some issues in the form of turnovers and durability concerns. So if Montgomery can unlock Drones' full potential, the Hokies could surprise everyone. At running back, expect a committee approach led by bruising Bowling Green transfer Terrion Stewart. He brings toughness, but depth behind him is not super special. And at receiver, it's Aiden Green as the lone proven starter, a player who should shine as a true wide receiver 1. They did add some transfers to help, who could surprise, but depth is thin, and there's no guaranteed game breaker outside of Green. As for the offensive line, it's still their biggest question mark. It was the team's Achilles heel last year, and they allowed way too many sacks and TFLs. They lost all 5 starters this year, including center Braylon Moore and top tackle Xavier Chaplin. And this new group is going to rely heavily on a West Virginia pipeline, including transfers like center Kyle Altuner, plus 2 of his teammates. And I think that will help with chemistry. The left tackle spot does still worry me, though, and overall it's impossible to know if this new line will gel quickly enough. On defense, they already forced turnovers and got pressure last year. But the big flaw was the defensive line. Enter new transfers plus solid returning pieces, the D-line should be stronger. At linebacker, this team might be at its best. They returned Jaden Keller and Caleb Woodson, plus they added in a Pitt transfer in Jordan Bass, who should help the pass rush. The front 7 could cause real problems. In the secondary, they lost some key takeaway artists in the back end, but adding Isaiah Cash at safety definitely helps, and corners, while a bit of a question mark, should hold up. In summary, Virginia Tech still has legit playmakers and a promising quarterback-OC combo. But if last year's more talented roster couldn't get it done, it's hard to fully buy into this year's slightly weaker group, unless everything breaks their way. At number 8, I have Pitt. And the Panthers were on a tear last year before injuries completely derailed their season. This year, I'm betting on them to look a lot more like the team we saw in September than what we saw later in the season last year. And that's if they can stay healthy. And that all starts with their quarterback, Eli Holstein, who's returning. And if he can stay on the field, he should recapture the early season form that had people buzzing. The same goes for running back Desmond Reed, who brings explosiveness and experience. So together, Holstein and Reed should give Pitt a rare continuity at key skill spots. And they also have a strong, underrated receiver group that should keep defenses honest. As for the offensive line, they were hammered by injuries last year, but they did add 3 portal transfers to shore up depth and hopefully cut down on the amount of sacks they let up. It's not an elite unit, but it should be better. As for the defense, this is the real strength of the team, and it's up front. They have Jimmy Scott, Nick James, John Fitzsimmons, and Blaine Spires, and they headline a pass rush that should be among the best in the conference. Behind them, the linebackers might be the best unit Pitt has, adding toughness and playmaking. The concern is the same as it usually is for Pitt, and that's the secondary. There's some promising homegrown talent and new transfers, but if there is a weak link on this team, it'll be right there. In summary, don't let last year's late season slide fool you. This Pitt team still has legit upside. If Holstein and Reed stay healthy and the elite pass rush plays to its potential, they'll be right back in the mix near the top of the ACC. But depth issues in a shaky secondary mean they're walking a pretty fine line. At number 7, I have the Duke Blue Devils, and Manny Diaz did more than just keep Duke competitive last year. He overachieved, especially given how limited they were offensively behind a turnover-prone Malik Murphy. This year, there's real reason to believe that the Blue Devils could pair that nasty defense with an offense that can actually scare people. Speaking of offense, Duke landed a huge upgrade at quarterback with Darian Mensah from Tulane. He's a dual-threat guy who can hurt defenses with his legs and his arms. He's exactly the spark the offense lacked last season. They also bring back 4 starters along the offensive line that was elite in pass protection last season. Even if run blocking wasn't great, that experience does matter. And at running back, Jaquez Moore returns healthy, joined by the second leading rusher, Peyton Jones. So the backfield has depth and pop. And in the wide receiver room, that group looks quietly promising. They return 2 solid contributors and add Oklahoma transfer Andrell Anthony, who should instantly be the number 1 option. Overall, this offense should be far more balanced and dangerous than what Duke put on the field last year. On defense, this is the Manny Diaz special. Even if the offense takes time to click, the defense is still the heartbeat of this team. They bring back sacking leader Wesley Williams and several other proven disruptors up front, so the pass rush should stay nasty. And at linebacker, the group was already solid, and now they add Jaden Francois, who could take them to the next level. At secondary, Duke has one of the best safeties in the conference in Terry Moore. His health is concerning, though, coming off of a bowl game injury, which will be something to watch. At corner, they are anchored by the do-it-all Chandler Morris, and they have decent depth behind them. If there is a concern, it's depth at the safety room, but the starting group is as good as anyone's. In summary, Duke already had a defense built to frustrate just about anyone. Add in a legitimate quarterback upgrade, returning playmakers, and more weapons on offense, and you get a Blue Devils team that could do serious damage in the ACC. If the offense even hits most of its ceiling, Duke won't just be tough, they'll be downright dangerous. But we need to see it first. At number 6, we have my Florida State Seminoles. Go Noles. But last season, it was nothing short of a total collapse for the Noles. Maybe the fastest fall from preseason hype to historical disappointment that I've ever seen. Now, they've wiped the slate clean, big-name staff hires, new quarterback, and a completely retooled roster. But the question is, will it work? Please, please say that it will work. On offense, I think the biggest move was bringing in Gus Malzahn at OC. And yes, I'm talking about that Gus Malzahn, Cam Newton's old OC, former Auburn head coach who played for a national championship, and most recently coach at UCF. If anyone is going to fix this offense, it's going to be him. At quarterback, Florida State is bringing in Thomas Castellanos from Boston College, who's the same guy who torched Florida State's defense in 2023. He's a dynamic dual-threat guy, but he's also short, inconsistent, turnover-prone, and he comes with some drama after clashing with his last head coach. Still, he can't be worse than DJU, right? And Malzahn has a track record with squeezing production out of imperfect quarterbacks, so I do have a little bit of hope there. As for the offensive line, they got a massive overhaul via the portal, and on paper, they could be elite, but in practice, transfers always come with some risk, as we saw last year, so we know that gelling is going to matter. At running back, Roydell Williams is returning after missing most of last season for injury, and he'll be splitting carries with Cam Davis and Samuel Singleton. It's a committee that I think should be average, but could look better behind a strong line. As for receivers, there are more portal hits. Deuce Robinson from USC has future NFL talent, and Squirrel White from Tennessee is explosive, and he's got a lot of speed. Landon Thomas is really the only notable returner at tight end, but the bottom line here is that the group should be miles better than last year, which is a pretty low bar. But it's still going to be heavily built on transfers, and it all hinges on how quickly Malzahn gets things clicking. On defense, they made another splash hire. Tony White from Nebraska should be a slam dunk, known for turning good defenses into great ones. Florida State's going to switch from a 3-3-5 to a multiple scheme, which means more aggression and more creativity. They'll miss Patrick Payton and Joshua Farmer, but the talent up front is still there. Darnell James and James Williams anchor the trenches, and Omar Graham Jr. leads a deep, experienced linebacker core. Secondary could be a strength. Edwin Joseph is a rising star, and Shaheem Brown and KJ Kirkland form a solid safety group as well. I do expect corner to be a weak link here, though, with Houston transfer Jeremiah Wilson having to step up immediately. In summary, there's a new staff, a new quarterback, and a reloaded roster. So FSU feels like they have to bounce back. On paper, they have the ingredients: an elite OC, an aggressive defense, exciting weapons, but after last year's disaster, it's fair to wonder how quickly it will all come together, or does it blow up again? And I like what they built. I think it'll work, but for Mike Norvell, 2025 has to be a return to form. Anything else would be a disaster. At number 5, I have the Miami Hurricanes. And I know ranking Miami this low will surprise some people, but hear me out. Last year, I thought they were way worse than their record showed. Yes, the offense was electric, number 1 in the nation, but it was built on Cam Ward's creativity and a loaded wide receiver room. This year, that's all gone. They lose Cam Ward, like I said, who's a mobile, dynamic, game-changing quarterback. They lose their star wide receiver in Xavier Restrepo, and they also lost their other top 4 receivers and their starting running back. They bring in Carson Beck, a talented quarterback, but he's fresh off of a significant injury. He's turnover prone. He has zero mobility compared to Ward, and as a Georgia fan, I'm not sold that he is that guy, especially behind a rebuilt receiving core. Bottom line, Beck can still be good, but he's a downgrade from Ward, no question, especially with this wide receiver group, which is built almost entirely through the portal. So don't expect Miami to look like the pass-first shootout team they were in 2024. But it's not all bad. They do return 3 O-line starters, including Francis Mauigoa, plus some great portal additions. They have 2 productive backs who should thrive if Miami leans more on that run-heavy side. If they adjust the offense to not put all of it on Beck's shoulders, it could work, but don't expect him to be Superman. On defense, we all know how bad it was at Miami last year. They were awful. So this year, they're bringing in new defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman, who hopes to change that. And I think that he can. He built some really tough defenses at Minnesota, and now he has better raw talent to work with. The front is the strength here. Ruben Bain Jr. and Akeem Mesidor headline a dangerous, athletic defensive line. But the biggest question mark here is the secondary. They brought in transfers everywhere to fix what was the worst unit last year. New faces mean potential, but again, also risk, especially if they don't gel. And at linebacker, they're losing team captain Francisco Mauigoa, which definitely hurts, but the group overall has more depth than before. Even still, my concern is still depth. Bain and Mesidor are elite but injury prone, and an all-portal secondary could still struggle against the top passing attacks. In summary, offense will not be as explosive without Ward and elite wide receivers, but it could be more balanced and steady behind a strong run game and a veteran O-line. On defense, they should improve thanks to Heatherman and better talent up front, but depth and secondary are still big question marks, and they have a lot of stuff to fix in that defense. I still see Miami as a very good team, just not the unstoppable shootout machine from last year. Better defense, slightly worse offense. Overall, maybe a healthier balance, but a lower ceiling. At number 4, I have the SMU Mustangs. They were my dark horse last year, and they definitely delivered, making it all the way to the playoffs. And guess what? I don't think they're going anywhere this season either. They have an offense that is built to reload, not just rebuild. They have Kevin Jennings coming back at quarterback, and he has proven that he can lead this team. He's a dynamic playmaker. He can extend plays with his legs and sling it downfield. The only real issue with him is ball security. He threw way too many picks last year, so that's something that will need to be cleaned up. And also, there is some turnover around him. 4 of SMU's top 5 receivers are gone, but SMU does like to spread the ball around, so I'm not too worried. Plus, Jordan Hudson, the second most productive receiver at SMU last year, is back. And they have some highly touted recruits that's going to step in. Senior Romello Brinson adds a true deep threat ability, and they have 2 reliable tight ends that return, so not too worried there. The offensive line, though, should be the real strength. Returners like All-ACC P.J. Williams and Savion Byrd They're coming back. Logan Parr is one of the best guards in the league. And Miami transfer Zion Nelson, who has NFL level upside, also in this group, should be fantastic. At running back, they are losing Bashard Smith, which does hurt. They're going to move to more of a committee approach this year. So it wouldn't really shock me if Jennings himself leads the team in rushing. But the bottom line here is that this team might be a touch less explosive, but with Lashley calling plays, the offense will still be dangerous. On defense, they are quietly elite and about to get even better. People really slept on this defense last year, but they were 7th nationally against the run and 10th in sacks, and they bring back the foundation plus some strong transfers. The secondary could be scary good. They have maybe one of the best safeties in the country. They also have Ahmad Moses, who's a tackling machine. Corners Jalen Davis-Robinson and Deuce Harmon can lock guys down, and the pass rush should still be ferocious. They have strong edge returners plus big help coming in through the portal, and on the inside, they're even deeper and more physical up front. The biggest defensive question mark for me, though, is the linebacker core. They lost some leading tacklers in Kobe Lewis and Ahmed Walker, so production should still be solid, but depth could be an issue. So in summary, the offense might have slightly fewer fireworks without the same proven wide receiver depth and star running back, but they are still built to score. The defense should squeeze even tighter, especially with a lockdown secondary and a nasty pass rush, and yeah, they have a harder schedule, but SMU will still be a brutal matchup and a real contender. This team was not a one-year wonder. They are here to stay. At number 3, I have the Louisville Cardinals, and it's year 3 under Jeff Brom, and you'd have to say that Cardinals fans are pretty dang happy. They haven't broken through for an ACC title yet, but they are very close, and could this be the year? Maybe. On offense, Brom is rolling with another transfer quarterback, and at this point, you just have to trust that he will make it work. He's really good with quarterbacks, and this year it's Miller Moss coming over from USC, and we've already seen what Moss can do. In fact, we've seen him carve up Louisville's own defense in the 2023 bowl game. He's accurate, he's efficient, he's battle-tested, even if he has had some ups and downs. He's in the right system, too. Brom gets the most out of his quarterbacks, much like Lincoln Riley does at USC, and Moss won't have to do it alone. He has some strong targets like veterans in Chris Bell and Colin Lacey. A dynamic backfield combo of Isaac Brown and Duke Watson who can carry some of that load. And the O-line, it's a bit of a rebuild after last year's excellent performance, but there's still talent up front and there's still some new faces that are going to need to step up to keep that unit as a strength. On defense, they're solid but not elite. Louisville's defense should hold its own, but there are definitely some questions. The pass rush is losing Ashton Gillette, which definitely hurts. The ends are still good, but not quite the same bite there. The interior of this line has the potential to be a real strength for this team over time, but we're going to wait and see. The linebacker core has TJ Quinn returning. He was the leading tackler last year, and they have Stanquan Clark, who could be a real difference maker outside. Depth, though, is still a concern. Secondary, obviously a big question mark. They lost almost everyone at corner. The new high potential guys are coming in, but we need to see if they can step up quickly. Overall, the front 7 should be fine, but it's not the dominating group that we've seen from some other ACC contenders. In summary, another Brom-led offense that should keep humming with Miller Moss at quarterback, good backs, and solid receivers. Defense is likely going to be good enough, but not quite elite, with a pass rush secondary that has some depth concerns. Louisville has the right coach and returning production, and portal help stay near the top. They've been knocking on the door, and while it's not a perfect roster, this might be the year that they finally break through. At number 2, I'm probably going to catch some flack because I have a team here that a lot of people probably wouldn't put this high, but I truly believe in them, and that's Georgia Tech. They are my dark horse for the ACC this year, and that's because I believe in what Brent Key is building in Atlanta. They showed some flashes of brilliance last year. Sure, there was mixed inconsistency in there, but if you look at the games that they played, with them beating Miami, going into 8 overtimes with Georgia, and stunning Florida State, the pieces are there. But now, they've got the roster, they've got the momentum, and one of the best recruiting classes in school history. So the question is, can they finally put it all together and crash the ACC title game? Well, on offense, it all starts with Haynes King. One of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. He's dynamic, he's mobile, he can carve up defenses with his arm and his legs. Next to him, Jamal Haynes, their electric running back, he's also back. He's going to get a huge workload, though, and there isn't really a clear running back 2 behind him, so depth is a concern, but, dude, he is dynamite. The O-line quietly became a strength last season, allowed the 3rd fewest sacks in the nation, open lanes for almost 5 yards per carry, so that's obviously going to be great for Jamal Haynes. The interior should be really strong. with guys that will really be able to anchor that unit. But tackle depth and edge protection are the big question marks for me. And also at receiver, they're losing their top target in Eric Singleton, which definitely hurts. They bring back productive pieces like Malik Rutherford and Eric Rivers from FIU, who just dominated there. And so they should be pretty good, but still depth is thin, and someone new has to step up to give King more weapons. On defense, last year Georgia Tech's defense could stuff the run, get teams off the field on third down, but they struggled badly with pass rush and forcing turnovers. Up front, they lost Romello Height, but added 2 portal pass rushers plus Matthew Alexander inside. It's an overhaul, but there's reason to think that they'll actually get more pressure than they did last year. And at linebacker, they're solid and they're deep, especially in coverage, but nobody jumps out of the page as a new playmaker to fix the pass rush problems. In the secondary, they return solid tacklers and pass breakers, but still struggle to force INTs. And the new DC specializes in coaching DBs, so they should improve overall, even if takeaways don't skyrocket. In summary, Georgia Tech brings back a lot of really good pieces, including an underrated but dangerous quarterback in Haynes King, a star running back in Jamal Haynes, mostly solid offensive line, and they added smart portal pieces on defense and have one of their best recruiting hauls ever. The biggest questions here are who's going to step up at running back, can the defense finally force turnovers, and do they have enough depth if injuries hit? But the bottom line here is that barring major injuries, there's really no excuse that this team can't take a leap forward, and I think that they will. Don't be surprised if Georgia Tech buzzes all the way to the ACC championship game. And that brings us to my number 1 team in the ACC, the Clemson Tigers. And the gap between Clemson and the rest of the conference this year feels pretty wide. And it's not just built on some fancy transfer class or quick fixes, it's old school Dabo. Development, homegrown talent, and continuity. And for the first time in years, this team truly feels like one of those classic Clemson contender teams. Cade Klubnik is back at quarterback, and he took a massive step forward under Garrett Riley's offense last year, and I expect him to keep trending up. The offensive line, one of the best in the conference with 4 starters back. They're elite in pass protection, and if they can get a little nastier with run blocking, this group becomes truly special. But the big difference between this team and past Clemson teams is the wide receivers. Antonio Williams is a legit next-level talent. TJ Moore is strong on the outside. Bryant Wesco, dynamic weapon, plus transfer Tristan Smith, who adds some depth. For the first time in a while, Klubnik has real playmakers everywhere. The biggest question, though, for offense is the running back situation. Jay Haynes could shine if he stays healthy, and true freshman Gideon Davis has big play speed, but he's lighter and less physical. Even so, Riley calling plays in this wide receiver room means Clemson's offense should be dangerous again. On defense, Clemson was good, but not quite vintage Clemson good, especially versus the run. This year, they look deeper and more versatile. Will Health transfers in to take some pressure off of star edge TJ Parker, and the interior line has the size. The question here is consistency against the run. At linebacker, they bring back their 2 top tacklers, and they add transfer from Alabama Jeremiah Alexander for even more punch. The real strength, though, is the secondary. Avian Terrell is a future NFL player, and the whole DB unit is experienced, talented, and deep. Overall, this defense should kick into another gear, better up front, elite in coverage, and nasty in pursuit. In summary, Clemson finally has explosive receivers again, and Klubnik should keep improving, and the O-line is a real strength. Plus, the defense brings back talent, adds smart transfers, and has NFL guys on the back end. Dabo did not overhaul through the portal, he built from within, and it looks like it's working. This isn't just the best team in the ACC, this is a legit playoff and national title contender. If the Tigers can stay healthy and the run defense tightens up, they might finish the season exactly where they used to be, on top of college football. Thank you guys for watching this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you guys enjoyed. So, yeah, peace.